Tim Autrey, and welcome to this resource video for the 7 Natural Principles of Human Performance. If you already have a copy of the book, 7 Natural Principles of Human Performance, great! If not, you can grab a hard copy, Kindle version, or audio version on Amazon. You can also find more information about the book at 7naturalprinciples.com. That's 7naturalprinciples.com. This video is an excerpt from the PPI Human Performance Leadership Masterclass, which is part of PPI Lab. You can access the full course as well as a ton of resources to help you improve safety, reliability, efficiency, productivity, and profitability by joining PPI Lab. More information is available at ppiweb.io/PPI Lab. That's ppiweb.io/PPI Lab. Thanks for being here. Let's get to it. So on page 41 of your handout, you see a diagram that looks something like this, and you notice you got to fill in all the blanks. One of the reasons for that is because before I teach this to you, if you recall, I mentioned that when you really understand this model, you can get virtually any other human being to do virtually anything you want them to do. This model is incredibly powerful. It can be used for incredibly good purposes. It can be honestly used for evil purposes. This is the exact same model Adolf Hitler used in Nazi Germany to get human beings to do horrible things to other human beings that they would normally never do. It's also the same model that Gandhi used to lead the most peaceful revolution in the history of planet Earth. So it can be used for incredibly good things or incredibly bad things. And because of that, I need to get your solemn commitment on the other side of your screen right now as you're listening and watching this. I need to get your honest, solemn commitment that you're only going to use this for good. Got it? Okay, very good. All right then, so we're going to start working our way through this. I'm going to be going back and forth through the next couple of episodes between the whiteboard and the PowerPoints because I think it's the best way to teach this. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to get 4 to 6 years of college-level psychology within these few episodes where we're talking about the individual performance model. So let's go ahead and fill in a few blanks, and then we'll talk about them. So down here at the bottom in the first blank, you want to write in thoughts. Okay, so we have thoughts. Some of those thoughts generate feelings. Feelings pass through this red zone, which we refer to as the gap, and we'll talk more about that specifically. To generate choices, actions, and behaviors. Our choices, actions, and behaviors then interact with the world around us to generate our results. Okay, so again, this model is going on inside each and every one of us all the hours that we're awake, over and 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 over. We have thoughts. Some of those thoughts generate feelings. Feelings pass through this region called the gap to generate our choices, actions, and behaviors, which interact with the outside world to create our results. Okay, now let's do a little amplifying information to this. Studies have shown that the average person has about 60,000 thoughts per day. And some of you may be thinking, well, that's a lot of thoughts. I ain't got near that many thoughts. And some of you may actually be correct. But when we think about it, isn't it true that for most of us, our minds are just going nee, 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 all the time? I mean, think about if you have one of those issues like I do when I wake up in the morning, and I typically wake up somewhere between 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning, and my mind just starts going. And it goes to the point, sometimes I'm able to fall back to sleep. Sometimes I get up because it's the only way to move forward and get on with my day. So that's a great example. You're thinking about all kinds of things. Remember we talked about the power of focus. Well, you might be sitting right there right now doing your best to concentrate on this course, and you're thinking about, oh, how long is this episode? Is this going to go on? I got to go to the bathroom. I wish I'd have got something to drink or eat before I sat down to this episode. Of course, I can always pause it and I can come back, but if I do that, I know I'm probably not going to come back. Oh man, that Netflix show that I really want to watch is coming on. I got to go watch that. Of course, with Netflix, it can be coming on anytime you want it to come on, right? So, I mean, it's even worse now than it used to be as far as that goes. But the point is, our mind is just all over the place. One of the benefits of meditation, right, is to quiet all that down and to take all those random thoughts that aren't serving us and put them to the side for a few moments so we can focus with some intention. In the East, as a matter of fact, there's a nickname for the mind. They call it the chattering monkey, and it's just so you may or may not identify with that. Now, something about these thoughts that is really fascinating to me, and again, these are some recent studies in the field of neuroscience. First of all, by the time you reach about the age of 29, your worldview is predominantly formed, okay? We're going to talk a little more about that when we get into this region right here. Because of that, though, from about that age onward, unless you do something to specifically counter it, studies have shown about 90% of these thoughts are the same, day after day after day after day. So you may think that you are moving forward in your life. However, if you're not actively doing that, you're just living essentially the same day over and over and over and over. And those same studies have shown, so about 90% of these are the same. And these same studies have shown that about 70% are negative. 70% are negative. Now, again, I don't know if that has something to do with the lizard brain coming from a place of fear, because its predominant mechanism is survival, and so it's constantly looking for things that are negative. I don't really know. But we do know from recent science that out of these 60,000 thoughts per day, about 90% of them are the same, 70% of them are negative. And that's the way we live our lives, unless you choose to actively do something about it. Now, fortunately, we don't have that many emotional experiences in a given day. Studies have shown that we have approximately 450 emotional or experiences or feelings in a given day. I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel glad, I'm tired, I'm feeling energized, I'm passionate, I'm apathetic, I'm lethargic. Whatever it happens to be, those feelings come and go and come and go and come and go and come and go. So now, stuff's coming in, thoughts get generated, we have these feelings. Feelings pass through this region called the gap, as indicated, to manifest as our choices, our actions, and our behaviors. So let's talk about this gap for just a moment. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head back over to the PowerPoint slide, and we'll do a quick little review of this, and then we'll talk about the gap. All right, so here we have the same pyramid. And as we talked about before, we have thoughts. Some of those thoughts generate feelings. Feelings pass through that red region to generate our choices, actions, and behaviors. Our choices, actions, and behaviors interact with the world around us to generate our results. So what we want to do now is we want to talk about the gap. The gap is significantly important to you and me. As a matter of fact, it's significantly important to humanity. The gap is where free will resides. It's in the gap that you and I decide whether we're going to react to something or whether we're going to think through it, come from a better place, and perhaps respond to something. The gap is what separates human beings from all other living creatures on the planet. We're the only ones really that have a gap. Now, some of the higher level thinking mammals, dogs, horses, maybe dolphins, they might have a tiny little gap, but human beings are the only ones that really have much of a gap. And I'll tell you where that gap comes from. The gap comes essentially from the limbic brain. Now, we already talked about the limbic brain. This is where our emotions reside. This is where our memories are all held. This is predominantly where our subconscious mind hangs out. And I mentioned earlier that the subconscious mind essentially runs our lives. So the stuff that's in there and all those neural connections are what make us us and give us our personality, which we're going to talk about shortly, and have tremendous impact on how we conduct our lives. I want to talk about that subconscious mind relative to its level of power in your life. So if you were to take your conscious problem-solving neocortex, logical thought part of your brain relative to its power. And let's say we were to equate it to area, square inches. If we were to say that the relative power of our neocortex is equivalent to, let's say, the surface area of the bottom of my shoes, which may be, I don't know, 45 square inches or something like that. If that was the relative part of this part of your brain, your subconscious mind would be 11 square miles. Phenomenally powerful, phenomenally huge. And where it really interjects itself is in this thing called the gap. So, if you look back at the model and look at the notes on your paper there, so you had thoughts, some of those thoughts generate feelings. Now, in the gap is where we choose what we're going to do with that, whether we're going to just blast through it and react, or whether we're going to be more calm and whether we're going to respond. So what's your tendency when you get into the gap? If somebody says something or does something to you that trips your trigger, I mentioned one of my triggers earlier was people leaving shopping carts in the middle of parking spots in a parking lot. And that's one of my triggers. Now, I have an opportunity every time that happens, or every time I see somebody flip a cigarette butt out of their window, or in the rare occasion, I can't even remember when the last time this was, but somebody does something and I feel disrespected. I mean, those are triggers, right? I have the option. I can either respond like this, or I can apply a few moments of brain and respond completely differently. And all of that happens in the gap. So let's talk about what's going on in here. You've had some thoughts. Something's coming in from the outside world. You've had some thoughts. Those generate feelings. And then, before you actually do anything about it, you pass through this gap. And this is where your limbic brain, based upon whatever the trigger mechanism was, pushes forward your memories, your experiences, the associated emotions, and you have the opportunity there to think about that, to be thoughtful about it and mindful about it, or you can just blast right through it. So let me use an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say that when you were in the first grade, your first grade teacher, her name was Miss Evans, was meaner. I mean, it was horrible. You generally liked school, but first grade sucked. And it seemed like every day you'd go into school, and for whatever reason, this woman had it in for you. And as it turned out, Miss Evans was about this tall. She almost always wore a red sweater, and she had shoulder-length blonde hair. Okay, so at the age of 6 or 7 in the first grade, you anchored in all of that, and it's all hanging out in your limbic brain. So now you're the age you are, and you're in a parking lot. Let's say you're going into the Target or the Walmart, and you parked your car, and you're heading on in, and you see this woman walking toward you, and it happens to be a woman about this tall, wearing a red sweater, shoulder-length blonde hair. Where does your mind immediately go? Oh my gosh, you had a traumatic experience in the first grade. That's Miss Evans. Is it really Miss Evans? Of course not. But that is a trigger for you because of the experiences you had way back in your childhood. Now, you have the opportunity to do something here with that experience, and if you just blast through your gap, you're likely to not treat that poor woman very kindly. She might be the nicest, most wonderful woman in the world. So you might be walking past her, you move over to the other side, you give her a dirty look, you avoid eye contact, or maybe as she walks past you, you give her one of the universal sign languages, right? Well, the point is, it's not really Miss Evans, but your mind has associated those memories of a woman this tall with shoulder-length blonde hair wearing a red sweater, and you've been triggered. So that's the kind of stuff that happens in the gap. Now that's an extreme example, but that's what's going on in there all the time. Your mind tells you a story. In this case, that's Miss Evans, and then you have the opportunity to react, as I just described. On the other hand, yeah, you can turn from that into this. On the other hand, you don't have to react. What you can do is you can apply a few moments of brain and then respond rather than react. Now, before I go any further, I want to anchor this in your mind as to what it feels like when you're in the middle of the gap. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody said something or did something to you and you just lashed back out at them? I mean, you let them have it. And then after the fact, you thought to yourself, man, I wish I hadn't said that. Ever done that? I know I have in my past. At the moment when you chose to lash back out at that other human being, you were smack dab in the middle of the gap. So now you know what that feels like. Something triggered you, your limbic brain told you a story, and you just lashed back out. Okay? However, what separates us from the other creatures on the planet is we have the opportunity to choose to do something different. So now we go back to this model. Something has triggered some negative feeling, sensation, emotion, or whatever in your brain, and it doesn't have to be negative, but something that might cause you to react. Your mind tells you a story, and then, rather than simply blasting through the gap and reacting, you allow a little bit of processing time. You give it a few moments of brain, and then you respond rather than react. And I'll give you a little back pocket tool to help you do this a little bit better. We call it the 4-second tool. Now, 4 seconds all by themselves is arbitrary, but if you just count to yourself 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, generically speaking, that gives you enough time to come down off the trigger, realize that the story that has been triggered by some emotion from when you were 7 years old is not what's going on here, and then you can respond rather than react. So sometimes, based upon what happened to you, it might take 4 days. But the point is, you do not want to react and blast through the gap. I love this quote right here from Ambrose Bierce, where he said, "Speak when you're angry and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret." Anybody, have you ever made a speech like that you've ever regretted? Boy, I know I sure have. Or you write that email and you pressed send, and after the fact, it's like, oh no! You know, that's actually one of the ways to stay in the gap. You can write that email, but make sure, darn sure you don't press send. And I'll tell you one of the ways to protect yourself when you do that, or text or whatever. Well, text is a little more difficult. Email's a little safer because you don't have to enter you don't have to enter the address of the person that you're upset with. And you can just write it out, get it out of your system, process it, be done with it, and then delete, 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 so it's permanently gone forever. So I love this. I'm going to tell you something. Understanding this and understanding the gap is one of a couple of things in this training. When I learned it, absolutely changed my life. When you can learn to stop reacting and learn to apply a few moments of brain and learn to respond, you will become a much more effective, powerful, sane, less stressed human being, let alone better leader and influencer. So this brings us to our next key insight, which is key insight number 13, which is, and notice we've provided this one for you in first person. And if you have an issue of blasting through the gap, I'd recommend you print this one out and put it wherever you want to put it. Make it your screensaver, put it right above your desk, put it on your mirror, wherever. I respond to circumstances rather than react to them. This is absolutely huge to having a better life, to having better relationships, and to being a better leader and better influencer. So that's it for episode 7. In episode 8, we're going to continue with our discussion of the individual performance model. We're going to talk about your personality and how your personality determines your personal reality. And we're going to talk about the importance of mindset and perception. So, talk to you in episode 8.